Hey, this is Sharko coming to you with another review and analysis video, this time for Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. This will be a spoiler-heavy assessment/review of The Force Awakens, so if you do not wish to be spoiled, I would suggest you exit this video now. There are a few phrases that come to mind when I think about The Force Awakens. Nostalgic exploitation, shameless ripoff, borderline plagiarism, and lazy retread. The amount of copy and paste in this film gets so bad that this should be called the first installment in the unoriginal trilogy. Now, it's probably not fair to compare this new trilogy with the originals, but this film makes so many winks and references to the original trilogy that it's impossible not to compare them. But let's get on to the discussion of the film itself. Those of you that think this film is amazing, let me simply open by saying that the premise of this entire film is terrible, and it reflects the business side of filmmaking seeping into the story. The premise that I'm talking about is turning the most important character in the Star Wars universe, Luke Skywalker, into a MacGuffin, a simple tool to drive the plot, completely forgotten until the end of the film. The reason I consider this the business side of the filmmaking seeping into the screenplay is that if this movie failed critically, then people would still watch Episode 8 just to see Mark Hamill reprise his role as Luke Skywalker. This is what I call nostalgia insurance. In case this film sucked, people would still watch Episode 8 just to see Luke Skywalker actually do something. This tactic is even more shameless considering the fact that the teaser trailer included voiceover of Luke Skywalker. This may be the first instance that I've ever seen where a character says more lines in the trailer than in the film. Let that sink in for a second. Luke Skywalker was made into a useless plot device so they could guarantee an audience for the next installment. Well, you might be thinking, maybe they wanted to save Luke's character for the next film so that he wouldn't overshadow the new cast. That's a fair counterpoint, until you consider the fact that this entire film was a carbon copy of Episode 4, filled with so many winks to the audience and references to the original trilogy that you could argue that this film broke the fourth wall on multiple occasions. This is probably what's confused me the most about the reception of this film. So many people claim to hate movies that retread a previous installment, but they give The Force Awakens a pass because it has Star Wars written on it. And here's the funny part, it's not even a good retelling of Episode 4. It is inferior in every respect and plain terrible in some instances. From the business perspective, ripping off Episode 4 is a great idea because it will trigger a lot of nostalgia, obviously, and any criticism of The Force Awakens would then be turned on Episode 4, and most importantly, Disney would not have to risk releasing a completely new and original story. Everything in The Force Awakens can be described as creatively bankrupt, cynical, and lazy. I will now try to outline every problem that I had with this film in chronological order, but I'm probably going to go off on many tangents. I have seen this film twice. The second time was only to confirm my initial assessment that the film was garbage. So I might make a few mistakes in what events took place first or the exact interactions of some characters. The poor writing in this film is apparent within the first 15 minutes of the runtime. What I am referring to is that the motivations of every single character in the film are completely non-existent. For example, Poe shoots at Kylo Ren after the old man's killed. Why the hell would he do that? He was successfully hiding from the First Order. Why would he give away his position when he's completely outnumbered? He's practically asking to be captured. There is no reason why he could not have escaped with BB-8 into the desert. This is where the copy and paste from Episode 4 becomes apparent. He was captured after sending an astromech droid with vital information that needs to be taken to the Resistance because Leia was captured after sending an astromech droid with vital information that needs to be taken to the Rebellion. Also, they both just happen to be on desert planets because if you're going to copy and paste, might as well copy and paste planets as well. The reason Leia being captured worked in Episode 4 was that if she had used an escape pod, the Empire would most likely have destroyed it because they would have detected a life form. Additionally, the Empire was aware that she was on board the ship because the Tantive 4 was her ship and she was on a diplomatic mission, so if she escaped, they would have pursued her. In The Force Awakens, Poe did shoot some stormtroopers and had made his presence known, but when everyone was rounded up, he was still in hiding. A possible counterargument is that he was buying BB-8 time by being captured, but why couldn't he have escaped in a different direction than BB-8, making it so that the First Order would have to hunt him down? They weren't even aware that he was on the planet. Kylo Ren even mentions that he's surprised that they captured the best pilot of the Resistance. And are X-Wings so fragile that simple standard issue blasters can completely disable them after a few shots? Really? I also take issue with everything being renamed in a sad attempt at originality. Do the writers think we're stupid or something? Renaming things does not make them original. For those that categorize this film as paying homage to the original trilogy, I just have a simple question. Where is the line drawn between paying homage and blatantly ripping something off? The Force Awakens is lifted wholesale from Episode 4 with slightly different names for things. This desert planet identical to Tatooine is not Tatooine, it's Jakku. This group of freedom fighters are not the rebellion, they're the resistance. This oppressive regime is not the Empire, it's the First Order. This single leader in charge of the First Order is not the Emperor, it's the Supreme Leader. This battle station that can destroy planets is not the Death Star, it's Starkiller Station. The plot is also identical. Someone that is captured entrusts important information to a droid on a desert planet. The droid then finds some allies on the desert planet that help bring him to the rebels. The Empire, running out of patience, makes a show of its power with their new battle station. The rebels hide on a planet that becomes a new target to be destroyed. They make a last-ditch effort to destroy the battle station before it can destroy the rebellion. Make no mistake, this is not homage, it's unoriginal, nostalgic exploitation. But back to the badly written characters. So Poe is either stupid or impulsive for shooting at Kylo Ren. Maybe that can be forgiven as a moment of anger because he saw the old guy get killed. But Finn, the stormtrooper, has absolutely no motivation whatsoever. Supposedly, the stormtroopers of the First Order are all brainwashed since childhood to become ruthless killers. The first sight of blood, however, undoes the brainwashing for Finn. And why was there blood in the first place when the weapons they are using are supposed to cauterize the wounds? I'm pretty sure that besides the guy getting his arm cut off in the cantina, there isn't a single drop of blood in the original trilogy caused by either a blaster or a lightsaber. When Luke gets his hand cut off, there's no blood. When the rebels on the Tantive 4 get shot, there's no blood. And when stormtroopers get shot, there isn't any blood. Also, what does it say about the brainwashing that the First Order has its soldiers go through if they are easily broken out of conformity? The only reason that they even mentioned brainwashing is so that they can explain that the First Order doesn't use clones because the writers wanted to address the huge backlash that everyone had over there being a black stormtrooper. I would understand that if someone enlisted into the First Order of their own free will and was ordered to murder an entire village and saw his comrades die in front of him, he would have sufficient motivation to want to quit. But Finn didn't even have a name. All he knew was his serial number, and he was brainwashed since he was a child. I don't believe for a moment his sudden change of heart. Finn breaking conformity also undermines the rest of the elite First Order because apparently the training can be easily undone. Speaking about undermining the First Order, Captain Phasma was a huge disappointment. She had a worse send-off than Boba Fett in Episode 6. Boba Fett might have fallen clumsily into the Sarlacc pit after being unknowingly pushed by a half-blind Han Solo, but Captain Phasma betrayed the entire First Order by lowering the shields because they put a blaster to her head. This is the best that the First Order has to offer, a captain that cares more about her life than the security of the entire planet. And then she's thrown into a garbage compactor because they needed another reference to Episode 4. After Poe is taken prisoner, we get Rey's character introduction. She's a scavenger that can barely survive day to day by selling parts for food. She encounters BB-8 when another scavenger tries to take him. She stops the scavenger, but then tells BB-8 to go to the town and not to follow her. The very next day, she is offered a ridiculous amount of food rations for the droid, but declines the offer. This is another instance of a character not having motivation for their actions or simply acting outside their best interest for plot convenience. She does not take the offer of food rations that she desperately needs because she now feels attached to the droid that she was telling not to follow her the day before. So within the first 15 minutes of this film, we have two main characters act without any significant motivation. Finn had a random change of heart despite years and years of brainwashing, and Rey kept BB-8 despite being a scavenger in desperate need of food rations. Meanwhile, Finn helps Poe escape in a TIE fighter that's shot down and crash lands on Jakku. Here's a simple question. Why was Poe kept alive after he had revealed all the information that the First Order wanted? The First Order had no problem killing everyone in the village, even the old guy that probably had the most information regarding the map, but they let Poe, who had served his purpose, continue living. It's not like the First Order cares about the rules of war or prisoner treatment, considering that they had no issue slaughtering a small village. So why the hell was Poe not immediately killed? Oh yeah, because the plot requires that Finn rescue him, get his jacket, impersonate a resistance fighter, and join Rey in getting BB-8 to the resistance. Plot convenience. Also, how did Poe survive the crash landing? His jacket was found outside the crashed TIE fighter, so he must have taken it off at some point, but he later says that he passed out and didn't wake up until after it was dark. Maybe he took off his jacket when he first got into the TIE fighter, but I don't remember that scene exactly. Afterwards, Finn meets up with Rey and she is being attacked by 2 thugs that the scavenger guy sent to steal BB-8. Now before I go into talking about this scene, I just want to say that one of the signs of a poorly written story is writing that actively calls attention to itself. This scene calls attention to itself mainly because it was included in the film just so that it could subvert the damsel in distress trope. First, the trope is set up. A female character is being attacked, in this instance by 2 thugs, and there is a male character close by that can help. The male character would save the female character in the classic instance of the trope, but this scene subverts the trope by having the female character handle the situation on her own and not needing the male character's assistance. Look, I understand that tropes are overused cliches, especially the outdated damsel in distress trope, but designing a scene with the specific purpose of setting up a trope just to subvert it is just as lazy as using the trope itself. What bugged me the most about this scene is that it took me out of the film completely because I was no longer watching a movie. I was watching a checklist of demographics that a committee wanted the filmmakers to appeal towards. This scene screams made by committee. Like, I can imagine a meeting where Disney executives were trying to come up with a way to appeal to the female demographic, and they came up with, well, women want a strong female character that doesn't need a man to help her. Thus, this scene was designed to fit those exact specifications. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against strong female characters. I'm against bad writing. Instead of taking the time to write a strong character, the writers decided that it would simply be easier to subvert a trope and call it a day. If you still think that Rey is a well-written, strong female character, then I would suggest you compare her to Sarah Connor from the first 2 Terminator movies and Ellen Ripley from the Alien franchise. What those 2 female characters have in common is that they weren't written for the purpose of subverting tropes, and they are definitely not written for a committee seeking to appeal to a demographic. They are simply well-written, strong characters. Rey's status as a strong female character, however, is based solely on the subversion of a trope, which is lazy writing. Now that I am on the topic of Rey's character, I might as well explain my other major problem that I have with how her character is written. This has to do with the biggest sin that a writer can commit when writing a story, and that is Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina basically means that the writer pulls stuff out of their ass in order to get the character out of a certain situation that they put them in. Rey's character is written with many instances of Deus Ex Machina. For example, she can easily fly the Millennium Falcon with hardly any issues. Yes, for about a minute she struggles, but then she flew into the engine of a downed Star Destroyer, which I imagine requires about the same amount of skill as a portion of the second Death Star run, which requires an expert pilot. She can also conveniently fix the Millennium Falcon more effectively than Han Solo himself for no real reason other than the fact that the writers had already decided that she would take over the Falcon after Han died. I also find it funny that this film makes so many references to Episode 4 that they even begin to contradict each other. For example, Rey calls the Millennium Falcon garbage just like Luke did, but then she mentions to Han that she knew it made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. So she knows the record that the ship set, but can't recognize it? Wow, great going there, writers. I am also aware that people may mention that it was convenient that Luke knew how to fly an X-Wing in Episode 4. But I would counter that he chose to pilot an X-Wing, and that an X-Wing is probably much easier to pilot than the Millennium Falcon that requires a co-pilot. The worst instance of Deus Ex Machina involving her character, however, is her sudden mastery of Force powers. But before I get into that, why did Kylo Ren even take her prisoner? What I mean is that he knew that Rey had seen the map that BB-8 was carrying, but there is no way that she could have possibly memorized the map or even comprehended it to any useful degree. What I'm trying to get at is, how the hell does the Force interrogation work? From my understanding, the person being interrogated can only reveal information that they know and understand. So I imagine that if Kylo Ren's interrogation had been successful, Rey's only possible response would have been, "I saw a bunch of planets in unexplored space." And Kylo Ren would be back to square one. The only other alternative is that Kylo Ren doesn't make the person talk, but rather he invades their mind and sees their memories. The problem with this theory is that Kylo Ren taunts Rey by stating her vague emotions about her past, not referring to specific events, and he says something to the effect, "You will tell me about the map," meaning that he can read emotions using the Force, but to get to any real concrete information, he needs Rey to talk, and her only response would be what I stated before: "I saw a bunch of planets in unexplored space." The point that I'm trying to make is that Kylo Ren is a moron for not taking the time to search for BB-8. Even if Kylo Ren could somehow get all of the information that he needed from Rey, it would still be in his best interest to at least take the time to make sure that BB-8 is destroyed so that the Resistance can't find Luke. But back to the Deus Ex Machina of Rey having Force powers. Rey all of a sudden resisting Kylo Ren's interrogation, then turning the tables and reading his emotions and memories regarding being weaker than Darth Vader, is horrible writing. She didn't even know the Force existed like a day ago. Now she can overpower someone who is of a Skywalker bloodline and partially trained by Luke himself. Not to mention that the scene where she resists Kylo Ren's interrogation is one of the most unintentionally funny scenes in the entire film. For 20 uninterrupted seconds, Rey stares at Kylo Ren's hand. It's supposed to be suspenseful, but all I could think of was talk to the hand. But even worse, Rey is left in her interrogation room with a guard for no other reason than to use the Jedi mind trick on him. Now, I always thought that the Jedi mind trick was an advanced Force technique because you are bending someone else's will to your own, but apparently not. As soon as you get your Jedi powers, you can do it. I guess while we weren't looking, she leveled up and put her Force powers on Force Persuade and Dominate Mind. I would also like to point out that Rey didn't even wave her hand in the Stormtrooper's face, which is used in every single instance of the Jedi mind trick. Even in the Darth Jar Jar theory, people mention that he waves his hands in front of people to convince them to do something. People that make fan theories care more about the consistency of Force powers than these filmmakers. The final lightsaber battle that Rey and Finn have against Kylo Ren is also incredibly distracting due to once again Deus Ex Machina and the sudden disappearance of Kylo Ren's Force powers. For example, Kylo Ren has been shown to freeze people and even blaster shots in their tracks, but he decides to fight Finn and Rey using a lightsaber. He could easily have frozen both of them in place and just cut their heads off. You could argue that at the very least Rey could resist Kylo Ren's Force powers, but correct me if I'm wrong, at the start of the fight, Kylo Ren force pushes Rey into a tree. That doesn't look like resisting Force powers to me. Now, I know that people will mention the fact that Darth Vader never used Force powers on Luke when they fought in Cloud City, besides throwing objects at him, but the point is that Darth Vader wasn't trying to kill Luke. He was toying with him the entire fight. Kylo Ren, on the other hand, wanted to kill both Finn and Rey, so there was no need for him to hold back. And the entire planet was about to be destroyed, so it is actually in his best interest to finish the fight as quickly as possible. The instance of Deus Ex Machina in the fight, however, is the sudden expertise of Rey in lightsaber combat. First, she uses the Force to pull the lightsaber towards herself when it was very far away, and while a trained Force user, Kylo Ren, was also pulling it towards himself. Now this scene is obviously meant to rip off Luke using the Force to pull the lightsaber out of the snow when he is trapped with the Wampa. The problem here is that Luke was untrained in using the Force and was only able to pull the lightsaber towards himself when it was very close by. Rey is untrained in using the Force and she can beat Kylo Ren in a Force pull tug of war for the lightsaber. This is the third instance of Rey arbitrarily being given abilities in order for her to escape the corner that the writers placed her in. She needs to escape TIE fighters, now she's an expert pilot. She needs to escape the interrogation room, now she's mastered the Jedi mind trick. She needs to fight Kylo Ren, now she's mastered Force pull and can effectively wield a lightsaber even though she has never held, let alone trained with a lightsaber before. I'm going to go on a tangent here about the portrayal of all the weapons in this film. First of all, the lightsaber was cheapened because it no longer requires any skill or training to wield, as shown by Finn and Rey both using it with no problems. It was also irritating to see that a random stormtrooper had a weapon that was able to go toe-to-toe with a lightsaber. This legendary weapon is now easily countered by any of the hundreds of stormtroopers in the First Order. There wasn't even an indication that the stormtrooper with the specialized weapon was of a higher rank than any of the other soldiers. It was just a random guy. I might have given it a pass if a high-ranking stormtrooper had used that weapon, say Captain Phasma, but even then, the fact that the lightsaber can be countered by an ordinary ground soldier seems to take away from the cool factor of the lightsaber itself. And where the hell did the little yellow alien even get Luke's blue lightsaber? That was the lightsaber that fell down Cloud City after Luke's arm was cut off. The explanation that she gives is, that is a story for another time, which is basically the writer telling the audience, we don't care. We just wanted a familiar prop. And why was that lightsaber kept in an unlocked box, in an unlocked room, in an unlocked basement? Oh yeah, so Rey could conveniently find it. Great security measures there. Also, how did Kylo Ren even recognize the lightsaber as Anakin's original lightsaber? He probably never seen it before, and most likely didn't even know it existed. Oh yeah, and Kylo Ren's lightsaber sucks. Up to this point, all the lightsaber variations in the films, the single blade lightsaber of most Jedis, the double bladed lightsaber of Darth Maul, the curved lightsaber of Count Dooku, and Yoda's short lightsaber were all customized for the specific and unique fighting style of the wielder. Kylo Ren's lightsaber does not result in a unique fighting style, rather it can best be described as a cheap way to compensate for a lack of lightsaber fighting skills. He is so bad at dueling that he needs a handicap on his blade that allows him to cut his opponent while they lock blades. And the last thing that I'll mention regarding lightsabers is, since when does the lightsaber call to a person? I mean, seriously, it was calling to Rey? That's completely lame. Now I'm going to talk for a bit about Chewbacca's bowcaster. During my second viewing of the film, I actually counted the amount of times that Chewie's bowcaster was used as a comic relief device by causing people who are shot by it to die in a spectacular fashion. I counted 3 instances. And why is Han Solo surprised by the effectiveness and power of Chewie's bowcaster when they fought with each other for decades? Why does the power of the bowcaster matter, you ask? Well, I was also careful to see who shot Kylo Ren after Han Solo was killed. It was Chewbacca, with his bowcaster. This weapon that in 3 separate instances has been shown to knock back and kill people easily was shot at Kylo Ren, and not only did he not get knocked off the tiny ledge he was standing on, but the damage done to him was so negligible that he could duel both Finn and Rey later on in the film. This movie is so bad that it doesn't even keep the power of its weapons consistent from scene to scene. And whose idea was it that Kylo Ren should punch his wound and scream like a gorilla when he's fighting Finn and Rey? That doesn't make him look threatening, it makes him look like an idiot. Now I want to talk a bit about the random power of the starfighters in this film. Okay, so when it's found out that BB-8 is on Jakku, the First Order sends 2 TIE fighters out to find them. First of all, the sole objective of the First Order is to find BB-8, and they only commit 2 TIE fighters to chase after them? Terrible resource management and strategy on the part of the First Order. And I don't remember exactly the orders given, but I'm pretty sure they were told to bomb Jakku. So why send TIE fighters instead of TIE bombers? Anyways, the lasers the TIE fighters shoot cause huge explosions for some reason. Maybe they're charged? Perhaps, but I bring this up because later when Finn, Han Solo, and Chewbacca are captured by the First Order, the people that rescue them are the Resistance X-Wing pilots. So let me explain why this scene makes no sense in my mind. Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Finn are surrounded by stormtroopers from the First Order that are less than 5 feet away from them. Then, X-Wing pilots flying at neck-breaking speeds are able to accurately pick off all the stormtroopers that have captured the main characters. And the lasers shot by the X-Wing fighters are so weak that the stormtroopers just fall over. As a matter of fact, I think the bowcaster had more power than the X-Wing's lasers. There are no huge explosions, which was the case with the TIE fighters shooting on Jakku. So apparently, the strength of the lasers is completely dependent upon what the plot needs, and there is no consistency. Now the reason that I mention this at all is that stormtroopers are infamous for having bad aim, and they're on the ground, shooting at targets that are just a few feet away. These rebel pilots, on the other hand, have perfect aim when shooting small targets at ridiculously fast speeds. You might be wondering, well, maybe it wasn't the X-Wings that killed the stormtroopers. Maybe it was Resistance fighters on the ground. Nope. During my second viewing, I checked to see who shot the stormtroopers, and it was the X-Wing pilots. Also, this is just my personal reaction, but when Poe showed up again, I had forgotten he was in the movie at all. Such a memorable character, right? Well, that's all that I have to say about the weapons in this film. Now I just want to summarize my thoughts on the character of Rey. First off, Rey is not a strong female character. She is a lazily written character made to subvert the damsel in distress trope in order to appeal to the female demographic. I've already mentioned that subverting a trope is lazy writing. Well, guess what? It happens twice with Rey. First with the two thugs, then when she escapes the interrogation room on her own after getting force powers out of nowhere, and she finds Finn and Han Solo. Rey's character also has at least 3 instances of Deus Ex Machina, the biggest red flag of terrible writing, 3 separate times. And I'm aware that people will say, hey wait, everything regarding Rey's force powers will be explained in episode 8, so then it won't be Deus Ex Machina. My counterpoint is, I don't care what episode 8 will explain, and it definitely won't change the fact that Rey is a terribly written character in The Force Awakens. I also don't give a crap about what happened to Rey's family, and I'm sure the writers of episode 8 are going to pull more crap out of their ass to explain her force powers. But let me take a few wild guesses. Luke Skywalker took a wife from among the students he was training in the ways of the Force, but she was killed when Rey was a little girl by Kylo Ren when he led a revolt against Luke's teachings of the light side. Then Luke, heartbroken from the loss of his wife and failure to train Kylo Ren, abandoned his quest to train new Jedi and left his daughter that no one knew he had on the planet Jakku so that Kylo Ren and Snoke would not seek her out to train her in the dark side. Luke did not want to train her himself because he feared she would suffer the same fate as Ben Solo and turn to the dark side. So Luke went on a self-imposed exile. This way, if Rey was strong with the Force, she would eventually find him and she would have the choice in whether she wanted to become a Jedi or not. That's why the lightsaber called to her, because she is the true heir of the Skywalker bloodline. That, and Luke wanted her to have the same childhood that he had, stuck on a desert planet doing jack shit, attracting no attention whatsoever. Additionally, the old dude that had the map to Luke Skywalker was actually Rey's guardian in the same way that Obi-Wan was Luke's guardian on Tatooine. Luke had entrusted him with the map with the instructions to give the map to Rey when she was ready to become a Jedi, or to the Resistance should the First Order ever become too powerful. So it was never a coincidence that the map to Luke Skywalker was on the same planet that Rey was living on. This also makes Luke's exile much more understandable than just throwing in the towel because some of his students turned to the dark side. Or, alternatively, Rey is the granddaughter of Obi-Wan Kenobi because he took a wife no one knew about, but his children weren't Force sensitive. It skipped a generation, and Rey inherited the Force that way. Or, Rey's parents are never revealed, or if they are revealed, they are not Force sensitive, much less Jedis. Or, Anakin's ghost knocked up some random girl, and Rey is his daughter, making her Luke's sister and Kylo Ren's aunt. My money's on the first theory, mainly because it's the only possible theory that both explains her force powers, the lightsaber calling to her, and gives Luke Skywalker a sympathetic reason for calling it quits. And I'm sure that Luke's voiceover in the trailer was actually him talking to Rey. This theory also makes it so that Luke will be training his own daughter, which will be an interesting dynamic to introduce, and she will have to fight her cousin, Kylo Ren. Now back to the film. After Rey, Finn, and BB-8 easily escape from the incompetent First Order, they have to fix the Millennium Falcon. And guess what? They start fixing the exact same area that Han Solo fixed in episode 5. Then, when Han and Chewie board the ship, they hide under the floorboards just like in episode 4, but not before they grab the gas masks from episode 5. Seriously, the amount of references in this film is completely overdone. So they explain that they are trying to find Luke, and Han agrees to help them after he talks about how the Force is real and Luke was his friend. That was probably the best moment in the film, and the correct way to pay homage to the original trilogy. Just with a few simple words. Unfortunately, the rest of the film is chocked full of empty references, like the chessboard lighting up, and Finn finding the floating remote droid that Luke practiced with in episode 4. So Han's ship gets boarded by 2 groups of people that he owes money to. A bunch of monsters escape that Han was trying to smuggle, and that serves as a distraction for them to escape on the Millennium Falcon. But I got really annoyed when the monsters instantly ate people they caught, but when Finn was caught by one of the monsters, it dragged him around the entire ship. I guess they could sense that he was a main character and had plot armor. Anyway, they go to the planet with a really underwhelming cantina. Seriously, that cantina sucks. There were no interesting aliens, the music wasn't memorable, and no one was killed. And the cantina is owned by a 1,000-year-old small yellow alien. Oddly similar to an 800-year-old small green alien. Anyway, both the First Order and the Resistance get word that BB-8 is at the cantina. The yellow alien, Maz, tells Han that she won't help him because it's about time Han do something useful. Finn says that he wants to get as far from the First Order as possible, so he plans to leave the group there. I don't buy his initial motivation to quit the First Order, and I most definitely don't buy the romance between him and Rey. In short, I don't really care much for Finn's character, but at the very least he doesn't have any instance of Deus Ex Machina crap pulled. Anyway, Rey finds the lightsaber and she goes on some weird acid trip where she witnesses events that she could not have been present for, like Kylo Ren's rebellion. Or if my theory about her parents is true, maybe she did witness Kylo Ren's rebellion, but it's a suppressed memory. The reason I didn't like this scene is that it is meant to parallel Luke entering the cave in Dagobah, but the problem is that the cave was still a jungle cave. He just saw Darth Vader as an illusion. Rey, on the other hand, is transported to different locations, not just the basement in the cantina. So Maz tells her that no one's coming back for her in Jakku, and Rey decides to just run into the forest. Yup, just run into the forest, away from the ships that can get her back to Jakku, and conveniently away from everyone else just so she can get captured by Kylo Ren. Seriously, nothing anybody ever does in this film makes the least bit of sense. Everything is for the convenience of the plot. Anyway, Rey gets captured and Leia arrives after the battle with the First Order is settled. Now, did Starkiller Station destroy the Republic before or after the Resistance and the First Order fought on that planet? I think it was before, right? Because Leia hadn't shown up yet. I find it funny that they destroyed the planet where the Republic Senate was based in, because in episode 4 somebody mentioned using the Death Star on the Senate, and I think Tarkin was like, no need, the Emperor dissolved the Senate. In The Force Awakens, everyone was like, yeah, let's destroy the Senate, no problem, but first let's have a huge rally. You know, you can tell the level of respect that a writer has for the audience's intelligence simply by how heavy-handed things in the film are portrayed. The huge red and black banners, the loud speech at a huge rally of uniformed soldiers ending in a salute with one hand. This is some of the most heavy-handed Nazi imagery I have ever seen in a film that isn't about World War II. And this shows that the writers think the audience is too stupid to know that the First Order is evil without making blatant parallels to Nazis. The audience already understands that the First Order is evil. They're going to blow up planets for fuck's sake. No need to treat the audience like a bunch of morons with heavy-handed imagery. I'd also like to take the time to point out that the dude who is essentially the leader of the First Order commands no respect whatsoever. Most of the officers in the original trilogy, on the other hand, commanded respect. Grand Moff Tarkin, General Veers, and Admiral Piet all had a certain level of experience and respect. Maybe it's because they're all older and have something resembling an actual uniform instead of a vague black outfit. General Hux, on the other hand, is a whiny bitch that can't do anything on his own. He sneers at Kylo Ren every chance he gets, and when Starkiller Station was being destroyed, he cried to Snoke about what to do. Sneering at people and shifting blames are things that someone in command of a military force should never do, and that's all this guy does. And why does Supreme Leader Snoke look like Voldemort? And why the hell does he need to have his entire body transmitted when he wants to talk to the First Order? At first I thought he was a giant because every other instance of people communicating had lots of blue static in the transmission, but apparently they finally got better technology. And I'd like to mention that when I first saw Starkiller Station, my jaw dropped. I could not believe they made a third Death Star. The reason I was surprised when I saw it was because I had only seen the first 2 teaser trailers. I had avoided the full-length trailer and the international trailer because I wanted to avoid spoilers and I didn't want to hype myself up too much for this film. I also avoided anything on the internet that was discussing predictions or theories about The Force Awakens. So when I saw Starkiller Station for the first time, it was in theaters. At that point, my thoughts were, these writers have no shame whatsoever. The second Death Star in episode 6 was already stretching it a bit. I think that even Robot Chicken made a joke that the Empire had put out an insurance policy on the first Death Star, and that's the reason why the second one was being built. The second Death Star, however, still made sense because the only reason it was built was to bait the rebels into attacking it, and the entire rebel fleet would be wiped out in the attack. It was all a trap. Starkiller Station, however, exists for no other reason than to blatantly rip off the climax of episode 4. Leia and a bunch of rebels are also in a command station identical to the one on Yavin 4. And was that Mon Calamari guy supposed to be Admiral Akbar? Because if it was, then he should be at the helm of the attack in a Mon Calamari cruiser and not sitting around doing nothing. To be honest, when I first saw Starkiller Station, I just wanted to walk out of the theater. That was the moment when the line was crossed for me and I could no longer rationalize the film being homage. It is simply a shameless and cynical ripoff of episode 4. But in the end I stayed, and I even watched the film a second time just to help myself process the whole thing when the anger wore off. It's almost funny if you think about it. The Imperials just don't know when to quit building planet-destroying battle stations. I challenge anyone to defend Starkiller Station as anything other than a copy and paste of the Death Star. And if you say, well, it's actually a planet with much more firepower than the Death Star and has a power source of a star, my response would be, is it a battle station that can destroy planets? Yes, then it's a goddamn Death Star. It doesn't matter what it's made of or how it functions. What matters is that it has the same effect on the overall story. So Leia, Finn, Han, Chewie, Poe, and basically all that's left of the Resistance form a plan to attack Starkiller Station that has now made a target of their Resistance base. Their plan consists of getting on the station, lowering the shields from the inside, and then having the Resistance attack the weakest point on the station. Great, ripping off episode 6 as well. Finn tells the Resistance that he knows how to shut down the shields, so he goes with Han and Chewie on the Millennium Falcon to land on Starkiller Station. There is a problem with this plan, however, and that is that the shields are on in the first place. So Han says, if we approach light speed, we can pass the shields because they don't block light speed travel. All I heard was, the plot requires us to get on this planet, so we're gonna get on this planet. At this point, I didn't even care anymore, because why should I care when the writers obviously don't? And in case you're wondering, yes, this is another instance of Deus Ex Machina. So they land, and Finn tells Han that he actually doesn't know how to take down the shields because he works in sanitation. Well then, what is a sanitation worker doing in the front lines of a D-Day style invasion on Jakku? Anyway, he says that he only went because he wants to rescue Rey. But how the hell did he even know that she was on Starkiller Station? Doesn't Kylo Ren have his own personal Star Destroyer? Wouldn't that be the most logical place to check first? And she doesn't even need rescuing because she's busy getting force powers out of nowhere and subverting the damsel in distress trope. So they force Captain Phasma to lower the shields. Way to betray your principles in training, Phasma. Then they get word to the Resistance that the shields are down and they begin their boring attack. All they do is fire repeatedly at a single spot on the planet's surface. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were only X-Wings in the Resistance fighters. Where are the Y-Wing bombers? You would think that an area that needs to be bombed would have the Resistance send bomber-class fighters. There is no suspense or even a sense of progression in destroying whatever the hell they wanted to destroy. The battle was painfully underwhelming. So Han, Chewie, and Finn meet up with Rey and they decide to help out the Resistance by placing charges inside the reactor or power converter or whatever the hell it is they were trying to destroy. But way before that, when Han first landed on the station, Kylo Ren sensed his presence and even said his name. Similar to how Darth Vader knew that Obi-Wan was on the first Death Star. So Kylo Ren happens to be in that same reactor area, but he doesn't sense Han Solo, who is like 20 feet away. Anyway, Han talks to Kylo Ren for a bit, and all throughout this time I am already completely detached from this film and from all immersion. I am not invested in the characters, events, or anything in the story. So I start thinking, how will this turn out? Well, there's no way Kylo Ren is going to turn to the light side, because he has to be the villain for the next movies, and Harrison Ford has always wanted his character to be killed off, so Han's going to die. And seconds later, Han was killed. The packed theater I was in fell dead silent as Han's body fell off the tiny walking platform. I couldn't care less that Han was killed because the entire film was so bad that I lost all investment that I had for a character from the original trilogy. Han's death was probably only put there so that it would shock people into forgetting what an awful movie they were watching. And he gets killed by the worst villain ever written in a Star Wars film. I swear, Darth Jar Jar is a better written villain. Kylo Ren is such a terrible character that he could easily pass off as a parody villain. First of all, this character wears a helmet for no reason, and before someone brings up Boba Fett, he wears it because it's part of his Mandalorian armor. Darth Vader wore a helmet because he needed to breathe. Kylo Ren wears a helmet because he has a grandfather complex. The guy practically worships Vader, but he's a dark side Jedi. Didn't he get the memo that Anakin found redemption and turned to the light side in his final moments? There is also a scene where Kylo Ren says he feels the pull of the light and he wants Vader to show him the power of the dark side. First of all, why doesn't Anakin's Force Ghost appear to Kylo Ren to tell him that he's an idiot? And second of all, this concept of the light side pulling him is ridiculous. Someone at Disney must have thought, we have a bunch of characters that are light side Jedi and they are pulled to the dark side. How about we do the reverse and have a dark Jedi be pulled to the light? Well, person at Disney, the reverse does not work because that's not how the light side and the dark side work. The dark side is categorized by temptation, lust for power, and strong emotions like anger. The light side is categorized by peace, tranquility, and not giving in to the temptations of strong emotions. Luke almost fell to the dark side when he gave in to his anger in his second duel with Vader. The light side is not tempting and does not actively pull dark Jedi towards it. If anything, a dark Jedi achieving redemption is probably many times more difficult compared to a light side Jedi falling to the dark side. Even if the dark Jedi regrets their actions, they are burdened with guilt and a sense that redemption is out of their reach. In that sense, the dark side holds the Jedi hostage. So whoever thought of including the line, "I feel the pull of the light," well, congratulations, you have no understanding of any aspect of the Force, light or dark. Kylo Ren also has the mentality of a toddler. He takes off his helmet at the first provocation from Rey because simple taunts still get to him. A villain that complies to a prisoner's taunt is not threatening in the least. Also, why isn't his hair sweaty and messy? He's been wearing that helmet pretending to be Vader for hours on end, but his hair is not affected in the least? He doesn't even have helmet hair or anything like that? These are small things that are really distracting during the viewing experience. Kylo Ren also has multiple temper tantrums where he takes out his lightsaber and swings it violently at anything in front of him. He also whines to Snoke when Rey resists his Force powers. This child with anger issues and temper tantrums is the guy who led the Jedi against Luke, and that was supposedly years ago, so this is the more mature version? This childish idiot? So my question is, how incompetent was Luke to not be able to win against this idiot that has the mentality of a child? The second instance where Kylo Ren takes off his helmet is when Han Solo requests that he look at the face of his son. He takes off his helmet and has the most awkward monologue where he refers to himself in the third person. He says something along the lines of, "Your son is dead, he was weak so I killed him." Well, the writers were obviously trying to parallel how Obi-Wan had told Luke that Vader had killed Anakin, but in reality they were the same person. Let me first say that there are people that think Lucas planned everything ahead of time, from Vader being Luke's father to Leia being his sister. I don't think he planned that far ahead. Everything ended up working out, but I think that originally Darth Vader and Anakin were meant to be two separate people. That is why Obi-Wan phrased his response that Anakin was killed by Vader. Not knowing ahead of time that Vader was Luke's father is the reason why in episode 6, Luke has to ask Obi-Wan why he lied, and Obi-Wan gives the weak defense of, "From a certain point of view, Vader did sort of kill Anakin." Oh, and Luke kisses Leia, so they were not originally planned to be siblings. The point that I'm trying to get at is that Obi-Wan's phrasing was a mistake. So ripping off the phrasing of the dark side killing the person is stupid. And making the character refer to himself in the third person, saying that he killed himself, is some of the most forced and awkward lines of dialogue I have ever heard. It makes it sound like he has multiple personalities like Gollum. The final reason that the phrasing, "he was weak so I killed him," pisses me off is that it distances the character from accepting responsibility for his actions. Ben Solo didn't turn to the dark side. The Kylo Ren personality just overpowered him. A person changing because they turn to the dark side is very different from a completely different personality taking over. So not only do the writers not understand simple principles of the light and dark side of the Force, but they also don't understand what happens when a Jedi falls to the dark side. And when he kills Han Solo, his own father, it isn't even born out of an evil intention or hate. He just wanted to level up in his dark Jedi status to massive prick. I've already explained that his lightsaber is actually a crutch because he probably can't even win in a fair lightsaber duel. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the villain for this trilogy. A whiny, childish, tantrum-throwing moron that doesn't understand anything about the light or dark side of the Force and fights like a coward. And I am aware that people will say, well, he's supposed to be that way, so he's actually a well-written character. My response to that would be, well then, you are lost. On a completely different side note, what are the odds that Kylo Ren has stuck his dick in Darth Vader's mask? I think they're pretty high, but that's just me. Even if you are a fan of Kylo Ren, you cannot deny that it is within the realm of possibility. Let that idea sink in for a minute. The villain for this trilogy has most likely stuck his dick in Darth Vader's mask. Now stop thinking about it. Back to the review. So the charges go off, and that creates an opening for Poe to destroy whatever the hell he needed to destroy. Meanwhile, Finn gets his ass kicked by Kylo Ren, then Rey kicks Kylo Ren's ass. Before she kills him, however, there is an earthquake that separates him. Wow, that is the most convenient earthquake ever. At this point, the writers have obviously given up any attempt of hiding their terrible writing. They just thought, we can't have them kill each other, so let's just separate them with an earthquake. Great, more Deus Ex Machina in order to save Kylo Ren from getting murdered. Afterwards, Chewie picks up Rey and Finn, and they escape in the Millennium Falcon with Poe and the surviving rebel fighters. General Hux and Kylo Ren presumably get away, but they aren't seen boarding a ship to escape. So Finn ends up in a coma, and then R2, who has the biggest portion of the map, decides to wake up despite being in power save mode for years. I guess Luke somehow activated R2 from wherever planet he was on. So now the entire map is complete. How convenient. So Rey takes off with Chewie to find Luke, and the film ends with Rey reaching out to Luke with Anakin's lightsaber. Luke doesn't say anything, he just stares at Rey. Then the film cuts to credits and the torture ends. Now before I end the review of The Force Awakens, I would like to address two arguments that most people would likely bring up. The first being, it's at least better than the prequels. First of all, the prequels aren't any real standard of quality, so that statement is meaningless. Second of all, this film was written for the purpose of cynically exploiting as much nostalgia as possible. Don't buy into the lie that this film was made by fans for fans. It was made by creatively bankrupt assholes who took the script for episode 4, wiped their ass on it, and called it The Force Awakens. The second argument that I would like to address is, it's just a film, man. You should chill out and not take it so seriously. Okay, then why are you here watching this video and taking the time to comment? If Star Wars was just a bunch of films, man, then why did you take the time to watch this really long review of The Force Awakens? You see, by watching these videos, you have already conceded that Star Wars means more to you than just a bunch of films. So your argument is self-defeating. I will simply end this review by saying that I am somewhat of a cynical person, and I expect that this film could not be anywhere near the quality of the originals. But I never, in all my cynicism, expected that the film to be absolute garbage that is creatively bankrupt and shamelessly ripped off from the original trilogy. I haven't read any reviews for The Force Awakens as of yet, but judging from the 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, I can imagine that my view that this movie is a steaming pile of shit is probably in the minority. I think, however, that time will prove me right. It may not be tomorrow, or next week, or even a year from now, but I think people will eventually start to remove their nostalgia goggles and realize that The Force Awakens is a terrible film. Thanks for watching, and please keep the comments section a civil place for discussion.